Hi everyone! In this video, I'm going to make over this MCM dresser that I got for free on Facebook Marketplace. This piece is vintage, but it's definitely not all solid wood. While the drawers are made of wood, the top and the sides are actually laminate. But that's okay. I love working with these flat front style dressers because their clean lines make them blank canvases for turning them into something unique and modern. I'm going to add some texture to this dresser to make it more interesting and then paint it in a beautiful, bold, deep color that's really going to turn this piece into one of a kind. And so with that, let's get right into it and start this makeover. The top of this dresser is made of laminate and has some water damage and quite a few scratches and dings. Once I sand out the scratches, it'll be important that I use a primer to seal the particle board substrate that's exposed. The drawers are made of wood and have dovetail joints, which is great. Overall, this dresser has a modern silhouette and is in pretty good shape. Before I could get to the fun stuff, I had to properly prep this piece. First, I removed all the hardware and put it aside because I knew I wouldn't be reusing them. I always remove the hardware before I clean because you'd be surprised how much gunk and dirt can build up behind there. I used Crud Cutter and thoroughly cleaned the inside and outside of the entire dresser. And then after cleaning with Crud Cutter, I rinsed off any leftover residue with some clean water and a rag. Next, I used wood filler to fill up the hardware holes. Even though I was going to be adding texture to the front of the drawers, some of the holes may still be visible once it's done, and so it was important to fill those up. After that, I sanded the body of the dresser with 180 grit sandpaper. I sanded out the scratches and sanded smooth the area with the water damage, being sure to feather out the edges so that it was level with the rest of the top. I scuff sanded the rest of the body so that my paint and primer would have something to adhere to. After that, I wiped down the piece with a bit of water to remove the standing dust. I knew I wanted to add some molding to the front of my dresser to give it a little bit of texture. So the family took a trip to Home Depot to see what my options were. I ended up picking up some finger-jointed pine molding that I knew would be perfect and give me exactly the look I was going for. When I got home, I used my miter saw to cut them down so that each piece was the height of a dresser drawer. So now that we have these pieces of trim cut down to the height of the drawer, it's time to actually attach them. And we want to, again, have a gap between the pieces as we attach them so that we create that beautiful fluted look that's all the rave right now. And I think will really elevate this piece and make it stand out. So when it comes to actually attaching it, this is where things got a little bit tricky because I wanted the end pieces to line up exactly flush to the end of the drawer because we want the drawer to sit inside flush with the body of the dresser. And we also need to make sure that each piece is exactly the same distance apart so you have an even look. So after a lot of trial and error, I figured out that actually this trim piece placed vertically was really the best spacer I could use. And if I used that and lined up everything accordingly, my end trim pieces would line up pretty much flush with the end of the drawer. So what I've done is drawn a line at the center of the drawer, and I take one of the trim pieces and place it so that the center of the trim piece is in line with that line. And then I just use one of these as a spacer, just so that you can see how it will all line up together. And I have some done already, so I'll push that over. And then when I get to the end, whoops, this shifted a bit. When I get to the end, this is lined up to the center. It, like I said, pretty much ends up flush with the end of the drawer. There is a little bit of overhang. We will sand that down and this will sit flush inside. My husband helped me attach the pieces to all 6 drawers using our nail gun and some tiny nails. Once all the pieces were attached, every single nail hole was filled with a bit of wood filler. Next, it was time to sand. I had cut the trim pieces slightly larger than the drawer so that once they were all attached, I could sand them down to be flush with the drawer front. This was so much easier than worrying about aligning each piece just right and then nailing it in place. This way, I ended up with a nice professional finish to each drawer. I then sanded smooth all the wood filler in the nail holes. The pine molding I had used had very sharp edges, and so I went in with the 150 grit sandpaper by hand and rounded these edges out. In hindsight, I should have done this before attaching them to the drawer, but you live and learn. It was finally time to add some color to this piece. I taped off all the drawers to avoid getting overspray of paint or primer inside them. I decided to use Hill's Restoration Primer on this piece because it's water-based, and so I could spray it in my paint sprayer and then clean it up with water. I didn't want to roll or paint this piece by hand because with all that molding, I knew it would take forever. Spraying made quick work of priming this. The Kills Restoration Primer is supposed to act like a shellac-based primer, but it's water-based, so it allows for easy cleanup. I did a total of 2 coats of primer. Unfortunately, this primer did not do as good a job as an actual shellac-based primer would at sealing in the areas at the top of the dresser where the particle board was exposed. So I sanded these 2 areas down smooth and then spot treated them with a clear shellac spray. This ended up doing the trick at sealing everything up and preventing any more bleed through in those areas. Once the shellac was dry, it was time to paint. I wanted to use a color that was slightly unexpected for a piece like this, but not so outrageous that it would only appeal to a small number of people. I chose a chalk mineral paint by Country Chic in the color Hollow Hill. Hollow Hill is a dark, deep forest green. This was my first time using Country Chic paint, and I have to say I really liked it. It's a thicker paint that had to be watered down by about 20% to run through my sprayer evenly. There is something so satisfying watching dark paint being sprayed, covering a surface. After spraying 3 coats of paint, I sprayed on a polyurethane top coat to protect the piece. I used my favorite top coat, Varathane Diamond Wood Finish, in a satin finish. Because this product is so thin, I had to turn my sprayer down to the lowest settings to minimize the amount of top coat that came out and reduce any chances of drips. After 3 coats of top coat, waiting about 2 hours between each coat, I let the piece dry overnight. After adding some new hardware, this piece was ready for staging and photos. Let's talk about this piece and run down how much it cost me to make it over. The dresser I got for free off Facebook Marketplace. Paint, primer, top coat, and other miscellaneous items cost me about $30. The hardware cost me $20. And my biggest expense for this piece were the trim pieces, which cost me $75. So altogether, my total cost was $125 for this makeover. I was actually pretty nervous to list this piece because while I loved it, I wasn't really sure how other people would feel about it. But I bit the bullet and listed it on Facebook Marketplace for $425. And I actually sold it in an hour for my full asking price. That makes my total profit on this piece $300, and my total time invested was about 7 to 8 hours, making my hourly rate $40 an hour. That's not bad. Plus, I learned so much making this piece over. This is definitely a technique I'm going to use again. And before I show you the final review, let's take one more look at what this piece used to look like. And so that's it for this makeover. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. Let me know in the comments below if you like the color and the hardware choices that I made. Also, be sure to like and subscribe as it really helps me put out more content like this. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next makeover.